I appreciate the spirit that is quite evident that has preceded our gathering tonight. I appreciate your prayers and your preparation, because these days and these times, unless we make preparation, we usually don't have the spirit like we used to. So I appreciate that. When I was asked to share with your women's group, I thought about it. I thought and prayed about what I should share. First of all, I have a question. Do you have time for this? I'm on Indian time. I appreciate the spirit that is quite evident that has preceded our gathering tonight. I appreciate your prayers and your preparation, because these days and these times, unless we make preparation, we usually don't have the spirit like we used to. So I appreciate that. When I was asked to share with your women's group, I thought about it, and I thought and prayed about what I should share. First of all, I have a question to ask. Do you have a time limit on this session?
Oh, we like to get home before 10.
Because I'm on Indian time.
We usually tell our people to be led by the Spirit.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to be bound up here for an hour. And yet, what I have to say may take 30 minutes. We just trust what the good Spirit leads. But anyway, as I was thinking and contemplating about what things that I might share, at first I thought, well, I could share some of the experiences that we had on the Navajo Reservation, and other different things, but the Spirit seemed to be telling me to share with you an experience that I had about 8 years ago. Since my conversion to the Christ and my conversion to the Restoration Movement, I've had two experiences that have been milestones in shaping and forming my ministry and my theology. The first experience of that nature I had was quite a few years ago, and it was at Atherton, Brother D.R.'s house. I was sitting around his big old oak table there at one of his class sessions one night, and as he was going over his material, a strange thing began to happen to me. The Spirit came and began to quicken and enlighten my mind. And I wasn't even aware of what he was saying or anything that he was saying there for the moments that this took place. But I had a scriptural vision of the things that transpired in the spiritual world, in the spiritual creation, and then those things that transpired in the temporal creation, physical creation as we know it, and then scriptural vision of those things which were to come in the future. And I want to say now, by no means did I receive all light and truth. What I received was like a blueprint. Those of you that have had anything to do with building homes and using blueprints of any kind, you know that you can tell from a blueprint what the finished product's going to be like, and the general way that it's going to be built. But then when it comes time to do the building, you have to go to your specifications, which tells you all the quality of material, the hows and the don'ts, and the whys that's going to be involved in bringing to pass that building. So that's what I was showing, basically a blueprint. And that blueprint has channeled my study of the Scriptures in my prayer. It's been a direction for me. The second experience that I had is the one that I would like to share with you. I have, like many, have desired with a tremendous desire and passion to know and understand those events that precede Christ's coming in glory. I've probably got in my file 30 or 40 charts that I've made and discarded, trying somehow to understand the chronological order of events to precede His coming in glory, because we're at the door. And I think that every Latter-day Saint and every good Christian should want to know and understand, at least to the best of their ability, and what are the events and the signs we're to look for. And we, of course, have a tremendous resource of information given to us by the Holy Prophets. The Book of Mormon, the Bible, Inspired Version, and the Doctrine and Covenants. We have a tremendous advantage over the rest of Christendom. And we should have and be the most enlightened people of Christendom. Well, I'm sorry to say, it has been my experience that we're not the most enlightened people as according to the light we have. Now, I know a lot of you are very studious and have done a lot of study and are. I'm not speaking of this group. I'm speaking of the church collectively. This experience, I believe, was an answer to a prayer that I've offered for 20 years of desiring to know about the events preceding His coming in glory. I was awakened one morning early, and I was told to get up and to go get my books and to begin to study. So I went and I got my scriptures, and I went up and I sat down at the table in the dining room. I opened them up. I didn't know where to start, so I just opened the scriptures, and I bowed my head, and I asked the Lord to direct me. And once again, I felt that enlightening power of God begin to envelop me. And my mind was being quickened in a way that is not humanly natural for us, the same way in that other experience. Now, as I share these experiences with you, I say that I was desiring to know the chronological order of events. I don't believe that all of these events were in chronological order. There was no time sequence in this. I wasn't given to know time, dates, or anything, but events. The first thing that I was aware in this experience, and sometimes I would be aware of things just by my mind being quickened. Other times I saw events, I saw things transpired. Sometimes I was probably caught up in the spirit. It was a very profound experience. The first thing that I saw in this experience was that there was a condition of anarchy in the United States. And I was made known, I didn't see, but I was made known that this condition was worldwide, except for two countries, Russia and China. And I suppose because of their control of their masses and their people, they weren't affected by whatever it was that caused the fall of the governments of the world. Now, I don't know what caused this collapse of governments. I used to believe, although this wasn't made known to me, that and I say used to, maybe I still do because I'm not sure what caused it, but I had a belief, and probably still do, that it could have been a total worldwide economic collapse, because governments cease to exist if there's not money to motivate the leaders and the politicians and government people. So although I want you to understand, I was not shown that. That's my own opinion of what would cause this to happen. And also, if the common market went under, you see Russia and China are not that much tied in with the common market. They're not that totally rely upon those things, the monetary system of the world. And when this condition of anarchy was that people had begun to band together in groups, and they were bands and marauders, and they were going through the land. They would kill somebody for a morsel of bread. There was no transportation, just these bands of people that had gathered together for self-preservation. The cities were something that was ghastly. Human beings become like animals, having no concern for human life at all. I just cannot describe to you the terror and the things that took place in the cities. And as I was aware of this and viewing this, I thought in my mind, well, what's happening in Independence? And immediately, I was shown the Independence area. And there was a multitude, small in number, of people that had gathered to the center place. And I was amazed to see that there was no church, no kind of an institution that was ushering in that which was going to take place. The people that had gathered was from every walk of life, every nationality you could imagine. Some were not church members. But the one thing that all these people had in common was they had taken the Christ into themselves. He was a part of them. And I felt this and discerned this spiritually, that was the reason why they were there. And the only reason they were there is because they had so much of Him in them. They were so much a part of Him that when the veil was rent, He could not withhold but to appear to them. They were there because they knew He was coming, and they were there to meet Him. And then the Lord made an appearance to these people. And I was made to know and understand that this was not a coming in glory. It was a visitation. It was not His coming in glory. He came to those who had prepared themselves. And when He came to them, I had an understanding of what it means to be caught up. The Protestants call it the rapture. We don't know what to call it. The Lord calls it catching up in the Scriptures. But what that was because of their oneness with Him, that simply, to put it, the veil was rent from their eyes, that they could now behold the real world, the spiritual world. There was not a total change wrought upon these people, but there was a partial change, like the three Nephites. And if you remember, the three Nephites were caught up into heaven, and a partial change was wrought upon them. They received what I would call total endowment, which is the greatest degree of the Spirit of God that you can have and remain in the flesh. flesh and not be totally changed or translated. These people experienced that. Immediately, as Christ appeared, he began to set up and establish a celestial order with these people. The city of Enoch and those heavenly beings that have keys and assignments to usher in the millennial reign begin to work with these people. Now remember, the veil was rent from their eyes. They could behold the spiritual world. The world did not see this. No one knew of this event except those who had made preparation and were there to meet him. And they began the process of establishing the New Jerusalem. There was an endowment given to these people, like the three Nephites. And immediately, the priesthood began to go forth with an endowment as the three Nephites. Could be very well the 144,000. Now, I wasn't showing that against that. It's my own personal opinion. I'm trying to keep my opinions separate from what the Lord showed me, because sometimes my opinions are wrong, but I give them as my opinion. The next thing that I was showing was that the Lord was aware of his other covenant people in the Old Jerusalem. And Russia had been in the process of, during this condition of anarchy that was upon the earth, was in the process of mobilizing, trying to mobilize her satellite nations, all of her communist bloc nations, and to mobilize her army. And it was very interesting. I know the Lord many times talks about a government as a woman or as a man, you know, but I was given to know the thoughts of Russia. I knew exactly what their government was thinking and what they were planning. And Russia saw, because of the condition on the earth at this time, that now was her opportunity for world dominance. And she was in the process of trying to mobilize her armies. Now, there was no commerce, no shipping, no planes, no transportation. Everything on the earth had come to a halt as far as transportation. So Russia, to mobilize her vast armed forces, needed the oil in the Middle East. And she was on the verge of mobilizing her armies and coming down out of the north to take complete control of the Middle East. And there was still one other little nation that was still intact because of their faith. The nation of Israel, the Jews. And they were engaged in minor conflicts around them, but nothing of any substantial nature. And were aware of the Russian armies coming down from the north. Because of her faith and her destiny, she went to face an army that only God could save them from. And when that encounter took place, it was going to be a mere matter of time before they would be annihilated, the Jews. And then I saw the Lord make another visitation. And he appeared in the Mount of Olives, just like it says in the Scripture. Just like it says in the 45th section of the Doctrine and Covenants. They saw him. And they wondered what those wounds were in his hands. And he told them, these are the wounds that I received in the house, my friends. And then they knew they had crucified their God. The whole nation fell to the earth in repentance that I've never beheld before. And he began to establish the old Jerusalem and the second capital on the earth. Now, when this took place, I realized that there was a resurrection that was commencing in the old Jerusalem. And I forgot to mention that when the Lord appeared and the new Jerusalem was established, that there was a resurrection that commenced. Now, if you understand nothing else from this experience, I want you to understand this point, and I want to emphasize this very clearly. The thing about this experience that opened my mind and the Scriptures up to me in a profound way was that Jesus was initiating processes. Everything just didn't happen like that, but he was initiating a process that began to unfold. And everything that he was doing had its ending result in that ultimate coming in glory and judgment. But there was a celestial resurrection that commenced, and the city of Enoch began to commune with those on the earth, and those on the earth in the celestial order were communing with Enoch, Adam, and all the saints and holy prophets. But it just didn't happen at once. It was a process and began to grow. And as Zion grew, her borders were enlarged. And as the testimony went out and the law went out from the New Jerusalem, Zion, even so the word of the Lord began to go out from the old Jerusalem. Now the Jews received an endowment, but it was not a total endowment. It was a partial endowment. They were not mentally or spiritually capable or ready to handle what the Lord had in a celestial order. And they still had a tribulation to go through. But they began to set up a Zionic order, but it was not of a celestial nature. It was of a terrestrial order. And there was a terrestrial resurrection that commenced over there. And they began to go forth and to preach the gospel to all of their neighbors in the Arabic nations in Egypt and around in that area. I knew that China was still intact as a nation, but I was not shown how China fit in to this. And then I saw the Lord make an appearance to an obscure little island in the Pacific. Probably maybe 1,000 or 1,200 native people, totally insignificant to the world, and have been totally insignificant to the world. But they were of Israel. And the Lord made an appearance to those people to prepare them to gather, even by angelic power if necessary, to the center place. And I was made to know and understand that he had to appear to everyone who was of Israel before his coming in glory. Because Israel was in the process now of being gathered, and the tribulation was still in process. And the only way that the saints of God were preserved was because of his power and his power only. When the endowed ministers went forth, no one could kill them. They didn't need transportation. The Spirit took them where they needed to go. And they preached with such power and conviction that only the vilest wicked could reject their testimony and the truth of their ministry. Then the next thing that I was aware of, the Lord had one last part of Israel that he had to appear to. And he appeared to the people in the North Country. And the best that I can tell from this experience, they were in the center of the earth. If I believe Brother Case's, Brother Holsworth's testimony is true, that there is a people that have been led away by God. And I believe it was the righteous of the 10 kingdoms of northern Israel was led away, the righteous, before they were captured by the Assyrians. And when he appeared to them, this people were hardly the kind of people that you would ever imagine to be on this earth or in this earth. They had used all of their technology, all of their scientific achievements had been used for their edification and the glory of God and for peace. They had never known war since the Lord led them away. And their prophets, like it says in the 108th section, the Doctrine and Covenants, spoke the word of the God, of the word of the Lord, and smote the ice, and it flowed down in their presence. And when they came forth to the New Jerusalem, the nations of the earth trembled because of the exhibition of their power and their might. And they came up, just like it says, to the New Jerusalem. And the treasures that they laid at the feet of Ephraim was not only their scriptures, but many, many records, and all of their knowledge and their scientific achievements, and the way that God had blessed them. And after they had come out from what I believe was the sin of the earth, then the Lord was ready to unleash his final testimony. Now, during all this time, the Lord was gathering his elect, all of his covenant people, all the Gentiles that would repent came into the covenant. But Satan was also gathering his elect. And the wicked became more wicked, and the righteous more righteous. And it seemed like when the gospel had been preached to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, that the Lord then had his final testimony, which was the great change to take place on the earth. This was a beautiful and marvelous thing. The oceans begin to recede back into the center of the earth. The land, the whole earth, began to transform. And to the righteous, this was the most glorious and beautiful thing, because they saw a new heaven and a new earth coming into being. But the wicked cried out for the mountains to cover them, for the earth to cover them up, because they knew that he was coming in all of his glory and in all of his power and his might and dominion. And the last testimony was the great destructions to the wicked, and the new heaven and the new earth to the righteous. Zion had become glorious. The old Jerusalem had become glorious and was of a celestial nature. And all the earth, even the earth herself, yearned and waited and longed for this event. And then I saw the veil drop from everyone's eyes. And every eye did see, and every tongue did confess, and every knee did bow. And he came in all of his glory and his power and his might. And those who love Satan more than God just vanished. Where the Lord took them, what happened to them, I don't know. But there was a new heaven and a new earth, and there was no place for them on this earth or in this heaven. I believe they lost their bodies and went, as the scriptures say, in chains of darkness until the last and final judgment. That was the end of the experience. I would like to give you an opportunity to ask questions, if you have any. Yes.
Did you have any knowledge that you had given to, or, I mean, we didn't know over in the last days, and I know you can't say the day or the hour, but I know I've heard one testimony that it will be here, you know, if you had anything like that given to you at this time.
I believe it can start any time. I don't know. I was not giving any time. Now, there's one figure that I was giving this experience, which I forgot to mention. Russia, when she made her move to the Middle East, also made her move and came down through Canada into the northern United States. I forgot to mention that. And when she was coming down from the north, I was given to know that they were stopped 150 miles north of Independence. How? I don't know. I also was shown that the endowed priesthood that was going forth would preach to this Russian army, and they were converted by the thousands, and they would throw their weapons down, and they were going back to tell their families back to Russia. But they were stopped 150 miles north of Independence. And as far as the time, I don't know. I'm not sure whether the Lord met his people first before the tribulation, whether it was after, how long it was. I just didn't have any times given to me. But I think the scriptures tell us somewhat of the events. Now, what I've done, like I said, I had this experience about 7 years ago. I never shared this, never mentioned it, because of the nature of it, and I just didn't feel it was something to be shared at that time. And I had a lot of questions about it. I had far more questions about the experience than I had answers. And so, when I have an experience of this kind, what I usually do is that I go to the Scriptures. And if the Scriptures testify and bear witness to the validity of that experience, then I can rest assured that it's of God. If the Scriptures conflict with that experience, then I better get rid of it, because it's probably not of God. And I can bear testimony to you that since that experience, I have studied to see if the Scriptures verify that. I've also done a study on the events. I don't know if you can see that very well. That is all scriptural references. I have not found one scripture yet that is contrary to that which the Lord showed me. I have been, when I came back from Pinyon, well, first, when I came back for conference, the Lord told me that it was time to share that experience. And so I told him, I says, well, then you open up the doors, and I will. And I wasn't back here for conference very long, and here I was in groups like this, sharing the experience. No. Let's see, the last conference. I was when I was still in Pinyon. I came back. I was a delegate for the Navajos. No, it was a conference before 86, yeah, 2 years ago, right. And that's when the Spirit first told me then to begin to tell that experience to the saints. And I, from my chart here and studying the Scriptures now, I do feel more comfortable. In fact, the scriptures have given me more of a chronological order of events. And again, you get a blueprint, but when you really want to know the final outcome, you have to go to the specifications, which is the scriptures. And the scriptures have enlightened me even further in this. Yes.
As you tell people, are you aware of others that are having sort of similar experiences? It seems to me that I've heard this before, but I don't, well, from the scriptures, but offhand I can't think of who it would be from, but
Well, when I came back for conference, this was put out on a tape and went around a lot too. And
Well, Bill has to say another testimony can kind of go along with this. I had man here, my husband and I, in '68, he and his wife were spoken to, and he's in his late 50s like I am. And he was told that he and his children and his children's children would live to enter the millennium. So, that kind of coincides. That's why I asked about the time. Because they said they'll say that you actually live to enter into.
well, if it is, like I have a tendency to believe, a financial collapse of the monetary system, which causes this, I mean, you could wake up tomorrow and it would be there. I mean, the indicators in all of the things that we hear on the news media, I mean, the savings and loans are going under, and they always keep the economy pumped up and everything on a low keel before an election. We're probably, the world right now is in the worst financial state it ever has been since we've been in a common market. And the blind lead the blind, and they just keep it all hushed up. But I believe the money lords are going to lose it. They're going to lose control. Yes.
I am going to make an assumption that you had this experience while you were working with your brothers, the Mennonites. Did you ever speak of this to them, and did you ever get, did they ever have a confirming spirit that would have led you to believe that what you were doing was correct? Not that I'm questioning that, I'm just wondering what their perspective was. Did you share this with them?
This happened right before I went to work for Indian Ministries in the church. It was about a year before then. My experience with the Native Americans has been that they've believed this all along. And what I had received wasn't anything new to them. I thought that was my watch. But many of the Native Americans, their prophecies tell of such events. I never had to tell Native Americans my experience. They already knew it.
How are their preparations now?
Well, of course, the Gentiles or the RLDS Church has totally bungled the ministry to the Native Americans. And the times of the Gentiles is over. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be here in this basement meeting. And the Lord is going to move among the Native Americans himself. We're not going to be involved very much in his work among those people. And I believe that, you see, Native Americans have something that we strive to have, and that's charity. They have a pure love for God. Not all of them. They've got their bad and their good, but I'm talking about those who are the ones who are spiritual. And most of them are. Even if they are alcoholics, they're still spiritual. But they have a faith that has been a challenge to me. I remember Brother Case one time told me that when he went among the Native Americans, when he or Hubert would administer to them, it was a miracle if they weren't healed. You see what I'm saying? We think it's a miracle if somebody's healed. It was a miracle if they weren't healed because of their faith. They have a childlike faith, and they have a charity. I'll tell you an experience that I had that will help you to understand what I'm saying. I was asked, a family came over, and their son was in jail in Gallup. They wanted me to go with them to translate with the lawyer, court, everything. So I took off and went with them to Gallup. 2.5 hour drive to civilization, any direction you went from where we were at. And when we got there, we met with the lawyer, and they needed some money to get a bond up for him. So we went over with them to a house there in Gallup, and it was the clan, which is all relation within the family by marriage or by blood. And there were people coming, going, and the lady was kind of in charge of this. She put a pillow down on the floor. She reached in her purse and she put out a $50 bill. And she sat back. And she didn't say anything. Pretty soon another person got up, went, emptied their billfold out. Another one emptied their purse out. Another one came around. They went all around the whole room. After it did, she went down, counted it. She set it back down. She said, "That's not enough." She reached in her purse and laid down a $100 bill. I don't know where they get this money, because they're the poorest people I've ever known, at least monetarily. And they went around again, and I knew this one boy. He worked for the railroad. He just got a paycheck. I mean, they make good money that work for the railroad. He probably had a 2-week paycheck of $600 or $700. He signed it and laid it in there. And I knew his wife said, "What about our truck payment?" He said, "Oh, we'll get another truck someday." Now, see, that's charity. They were thinking more about their people, their brothers, their sisters, their nephews, than they were themselves. I know what it means now when the Lord says to take up your cross, to deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me. To forget self. Of course, this is charity. Jesus never thought of himself one time, but he thought of his ministry and of all those around about him. So they do. They have a charity, and I've seen them just do. They'll give you the shirt off their back. They'd give you anything they own if you needed it. And they will go without, and they'll deny themselves that you can have. And then it works the other way, too. The first thing that I learned, first Navajo words that I learned when I went to Pinyon was Sabeso Aden, which means I have no money. Because being a white man coming out there and working for the school on the reservation, we were rich. And they felt we were part of their family, so if they had a need, they came to us. Well, you can only meet so many needs. And so we had to say no. And it's hard for them to understand that. But you didn't realize that you got not one clan, but maybe 30 clans coming and asking us for needs. You can't belong to all those families and help out. So, but they do. They have charity, and they have the gift of faith. And when the gospel goes to them in its purity and its fullness and the authority, they will do what we have failed to do the last 150-some years. And it's like the Book of Mormon says, I know we will assist them. They're going to do it. This was an interesting thing. As much as I've desired to know and understand the work among Native Americans, in this experience I had, I did not see or was shown anything about them. Interesting. I never saw what happened, how the Lord ministered to them at all. But scripturally, it's quite evident that this gospel is going back to Israel in power, to the sons and daughters of Lehi. And I might mention something that I've learned, and I'll just pass this on as a way of information, that whenever you are visiting with or dealing with Native Americans in any way that are familiar with the Book of Mormon or our church, I never refer to them as Lamanites, because the word Lamanite is a derogatory term for Indian people. They're the bad guys. Or right away you call an Indian a Lamanite, you're saying you are one of the bad guys. And if you study the Book of Mormon, you'll find out that it is impossible to call Native Americans Lamanites, only in the sense that they are a rebellious people and that they are in a lost and fallen state. Those that are in that state are called Lamanites. Now let me explain that. I see some frowns on your faces and questions. In the Book of Mormon, you remember the two divisions, of course, the Nephites and the Lamanites came about as the brothers divided and they became two nations. And they had their conflicts. But there were times when those two nations were not two nations, they became one people. And they were no ites. And then, right, but even before Christ came, in that golden age, even before that, there were times when they intermingled and they lost their identity as the sons and daughters of Laman and Lemuel and the sons and daughters of Nephi. And so what they did, these people did, they became like the Republicans and the Democrats. They took upon themselves the name because of political reasons. And the last two great warring nations in the Book of Mormon, it tells you in there that one took upon them the name Nephites, the other took upon them the name Lamanites. There was no longer a genetic difference between the people. Okay? So, it would be like if I was going to preach to a black congregation and I called them niggers. You see, that's kind of an offensive thing. Well, if you're among Native Americans and you call them Lamanites, it's the same offensive thing, especially if they understand anything of the Book of Mormon. I always call them the sons and daughters of Lehi, and I felt that that's a pretty safe grounds to be on. They are Lamanites, because there are Native Americans that are steeped in their tradition, anti-Christian, have no knowledge of the gospel, and are very rebellious people. And you could call them Lamanites, okay, because of their spiritual condition, not because of they are direct descendants from Laman or Lemuel. Now, is that clear, or is that muddy in the water? But I just thought I would share that with you because it's something that the Lord taught me a long time ago in dealing with Native Americans. They've been put down from the day one. And so the first thing that the Lord taught me a long time ago among Native Americans is just to love them and accept them where they are.